Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's episode 132 of Grow Yourself Up. And today I'm going to talk about something that's deeply personal. And I guess I'm trying to share some of the stuff with you to break down shame. So I got a diagnosis of ADHD and autism last year. And I wanted to share a bit about that and some of the ways that I support myself, particularly with ADHD in mothering and in life, I guess. And I have a sort of ambivalent or mixed relationship with diagnosis for multiple reasons, predominantly personal reasons, because I saw someone I really loved in my family who received a diagnosis, not a neurodiversity diagnosis, another diagnosis, and really struggled with that. And it felt like something terrible for them, that person, and it brought so much shame. And so I see both sides of receiving a diagnosis, and I kind of have been really in a sort of a deep discourse with myself and in the context of my family around diagnosis and the benefits or not. And specifically with myself, I decided to pursue a diagnosis because of some of the ways that I struggle in my life. And one of the main reasons that I struggle is that I find it incredibly difficult to get myself to bed early. And I understood that if I sort of identified with a group of people who also had the same issue, maybe I could learn from them about how they manage some of these things. And I know that maybe sounds a bit random, and I might go into this in more detail, but I was thinking, okay, so I've got this set of characteristics because an ADHD and an autism diagnosis in the UK, so I've been diagnosed in the UK, is very symptom-based. It's not, they're not blood tests or brain scans or markers of biochemistry that contribute to this diagnosis, even though there may indeed be a biochemical basis, according to a lot of the research I've done, and there may be issues with minerals and certainly different issues going on with neurotransmitters. I'm not going to go into that side of that now, but it's symptom-based, and it's ways in which we present in our lives that cause issues and that don't kind of match up with what is neurotypically expected from people. So that's first to say. And also there was a lot of, in the diagnosis process, there's a lot of focus on how you were as a child. So you've heard me share in this podcast various things. If you've been listening, you've probably heard me share various markers. So I was very OCD as a child and had a lot of anxiety. And I've always ascribed that to the death of my brother, and that was very traumatic for me. And OCD is a lot about trying to impose order in a chaotic situation or where there's been loss. And anxiety is a lot to do with the state of your nervous system. So, not having our needs tended to in childhood, anxiety is one of the most common results of that. And it's a state of it's when we're in our sympathetic state of our nervous system. So, but I learned that also there's a crossover with autism, and that the diagnostic criteria from the DSM-5 are very much based on how you present as a child, and not very much based, but they take that into account. And so I was really interested to note, would I fit into these criteria? And all of that to say, I also hold, for me, the DSM-5 is a document. It's like the psychiatrist's Bible, essentially. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's published by the American Psychiatric Association. And that is a listing of all diagnoses. It's all about nervous system dysregulation in my mind. So it's all about what dysregulation were we born with and what happened in our environment. There's also the ICD-10, which is more widely used in this country and in Europe. But these are the diagnostic Bibles. And so according to these criteria, I received a diagnosis of ADHD and autism. Now, what I found really interesting about how I feel about this is that it hasn't shifted my identity that much in terms of how I relate to my sense of self. It's helped me understand some aspects of myself, and it's allowed me to try and help myself in certain ways, and it's guided where I might look for help, and also where I might look for identification and strategies that other people have used that have helped them. And one of the reasons that I haven't, my sense of self hasn't shifted, and crucially, I haven't felt a huge amount of grief, because I believe that I have already done a lot of healing and regulation work, and along my own long personal journey in therapy has included a lot of nervous system things, various different things, and a lot of grieving around like masses of different things. So this, and crucially, a lot of shame has been healed. So you'll know if you've listened to the first episode of this podcast ever, I focused a lot on needs, because my hypothesis is that meeting our own needs, learning to meet our own needs, is the seat of our power. But many of us are very alienated from our own needs because of how our needs were tended to in childhood. So if we grew up in a family where our parents were unable to tend to our needs, or minimized our needs, or thought we were just a nuisance basically because we were a child, then our relationship to our needs, our own relationship to our needs, is that we may experience our needs as like a bother, basically, and then necessarily dissociate from our own needs because they've been considered to be a bother. And so and we may have shame about our needs. So lots of us have been shamed in childhood for our humanness. And so needs are very human, and we all have needs. But when you've been shamed for your humanness, then you want to kind of split off or shed some of that. And I have gone through a long journey of owning my needs, allowing my needs, of identifying them, of allowing them to be tended to, of asking for help where necessary, regardless of whether other people thought those needs were valid. And that's really, really, really crucial, because often what happens is that if we perceive that others will think, oh, this is ridiculous, or we have shame about our needs, or if we think, oh, I'm much more needy than that other person, or I'm much more weird than that other person, or how come I can't cope as much as that other person, or how come I need more help, we then try and be like that other person and deny that we have a need. And that if you have come from a place of that, then when you come and you get a diagnosis, say of autism or ADHD, there is tons and tons and tons of grief, because you haven't actually been allowing yourself to meet your needs. You might have already split off your needs, and you may never have tended to your own sensory experience. So, for example, I'll give you a very specific example of this. When I am bathing my children, and I mean, you might all think this is really weird. This is an example of my sensory profile, or kind of how I tend to myself. So I kneel next to the bath, and I bath them one by one. And I kneel because I find that more comfortable than bending over, and the bath is on the floor. What baths are like. I mean, it's not sunk into the floor, but it's on the floor. But if I was to stand up, then I have to bend. So I've got a little seat pad for my knees. I sound like a proper granny, don't I? But anyway, that makes it more comfortable for me. So I kneel down, and I love to connect with them one-on-one. And what I really hate, and there's 2 mats behind me so that when they get out, there's not water all over the floor. And something I absolutely hate is when the other child or my husband stands on the mat behind me and wriggles it, because it sends so many, from a sensory perspective for me, I can sense that it wiggles underneath me and I just cannot bear it. So as I tell this to you, you're probably going to think, oh, you're so ridiculous, or you're so sensitive, whatever. But I say to my children, when I'm in the bath, when they're in the bath, that I'm having just time with that child, and please don't stand on the mat. Like, if you want to stand there, stand behind the mat so that I don't have this very jarring sensory experience. So that's an example of me tending to a very specific need, which no one else in the world may have. Everyone else in the whole wide world may look at me and think, oh my word, I can't believe you're so particular. But for me, that is something. Also, if I have like a hair, I've got long hair, and when I comb my hair after I shower, or after I've washed my hair, I have to really pull out all the hairs and throw them away. I cannot bear hair going down my back. I can feel like one hair, if it's caught in my brow or like trapped underneath my top, it like really bothers me. And so I tend to that. And I make sure that I try not have them. So that's a very kind of, that's some of my own sensory sensitivities. And I honor and manage that to make my own experience more manageable, like more tolerable for me, if that makes sense. And so I guess I'm inviting you into a place of doing that for yourself without shame. If maybe you identify as neurodivergent, maybe you have a diagnosis, maybe you don't, but all of your needs are valid. No one else in the world has to have the same need as you. And you're allowed to tend to your needs. I mean, I'm not suggesting that other people need to abandon themselves to meet your needs, but, like in my family, I'm like, please can you just not stand behind me on the bath mat? And they know that, and that's okay. That's something that we can work within the confines of. So I guess I wanted to do this episode of like, how can we kind of thrive and tend to ourselves if we have these sensitivities and maybe a different neurotype, and allow that for ourselves. So I'm going to focus in this episode on executive functioning and some of the struggles that I have with executive functioning. And I'm going to talk briefly about something which is called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is a diagnostic criteria specifically for ADHD. But something like this also turns up in autism. It's just not labeled that. And the key thing about RSD is that it's all about shame. RSD is basically the different questionnaire that you have to answer for it is all about how do you feel if it's literally about rejection and how sensitive you are to that, and how where you perceiving that to happen, and how do you tolerate that, and do you expect people to criticize you, and how does that impact you? And I scored highly on that. I have issues with shame. I have a shame core. I've worked a lot on shame, but especially when I'm trying to step into something new, or if I'm pushing myself forward in an arena, I find that really terrifying. And it's like my fears threaten to become what limits me. And so I have to really work to overcome that, and to let the courage walk alongside the fear without having the fear totally run me over, and kind of stop me, and kind of keep me in this very small, constrained place. So in terms of the meeting your own needs, understanding your own relationship with shame is crucial to allow you to meet your needs, and to allow that your needs are important, and to allow that you can even voice them. Because if you label your own needs as like weird or needy or too particular or like too fussy or anything, then you're going to tend to try and dissociate from them and not even kind of like honor them in any way, not even try and tend to them. And where that's tricky then is that you're really going to overwhelm yourself over time and be less able to be the parent you want to, because you're tolerating things that you're finding really hard, if that makes sense, even if they are very particular. So we all have a different set of needs. We all experience things differently. And I'm going to tell you about some specifically now about executive functioning, but I really want to just speak about the shame has to be addressed. You have to know that your needs are valid. You have to know that you're allowed to meet them. You have to know that you're allowed to ask for help with meeting those needs, and to understand that shame may really block all of that. So I'm trying to, the kind of this, the major driver in this podcast is to break down shame, to help us all learn to meet our needs and to repattern our nervous systems. That is how we're going to change the world, to repattern our nervous systems and to parent in a nurturing, loving, and connected way. And so I want to share, like I'm sharing stuff so that you can listen and think, oh yeah, she's got that thing where she doesn't like the mat behind her. So let me look at my own needs. Okay, I'm going to share specifically, I want to tell you what executive functioning is first. I'm going to read you something. So this is from Psychology Today, which is like an online magazine and a print magazine. Executive function describes a set of cognitive processes and mental skills that help an individual plan, monitor, and successfully execute their goals. The executive functions, as they're known, include attentional control, working memory, inhibition, and problem solving, many of which are thought to originate in the brain's prefrontal cortex. So listen to that, are thought to originate in the brain's prefrontal cortex. We don't yet know all of the stuff about this. Like remember I've shared before about the decade of the brain, which was a decade of a huge amount of research being spent a huge amount of money being spent on brain research. It was named that, and that was the decade between 1990 to 2000. And that was in the States, that there was a huge amount of research funded at that time. And as a result, we now know a lot more about our brain. But that's very recent history. Like 1990 is only 35 years ago. And so there's still so much we don't know about the brain. Things are not set in stone. There's competing opinions on the brain. There's different opinions. Someone called Lisa Feldman Barrett has different opinions about the brain to like the dominant view of a triune brain. There's really a lot of stuff that's still not nailed down. Let me put it that way. So just to say a few more bits about executive functioning. So many behaviors in which we engage, such as breathing or stepping out of the way of an oncoming car, occur without conscious thought. Most others, however, rely on executive function. Any process or goal pursuit that requires time management, decision-making, and storing information in one's memory makes use of executive function to some degree. Since much of modern life is process-driven and demands that individuals set and meet goals, disruptions in executive function can make it challenging for someone to succeed in school, at work, or in the household. And what are the different executive functions? I'll just tell you this last bit. Many experts believe that the human mind contains 7 different executive functions. These include self-awareness, inhibition, non-verbal working memory, which is short-term memory related to sensory and spatial information, verbal working memory, short-term memory related to speech and language, emotional regulation, motivational regulation, and planning and problem solving. Okay. And then there's just one thing about whether executive functioning is related to intelligence. So studies have found a consistent overlap between executive functioning and general intelligence. However, some really high IQ individuals struggle with executive functions. So there's clearly more to intelligence than executive functions. So I am a high IQ individual and I struggle with executive functions. So let's not like label anything around being intelligent or not intelligent. I'm going to speak specifically about, so time blindness is an area that I have really struggled with, and dopamine seeking is an area. There are lots of other things that contribute to ADHD, and I'll talk about those in another episode. But from a point of view of, if we're holding in mind the shame, dopamine seeking and being unable to complete a task from start to finish is something that has often brought so much shame. And this is something that people are shamed for in school a lot. So if you can't kind of stay focused and pay attention, you are often seen as disruptive, a whole bunch of unkind and negative labels. You're seen as like away with the fairies, or really distractible, or trouble causing, or all sorts of things like that. And so I wanted to kind of speak specifically to that and tell you how I cope with dopamine seeking, and also what kind of how I language things to myself. So I think I'll talk about that first. So what dopamine seeking means is that a brain that is searching for dopamine will constantly be searching for new things, for novelty. So it might mean that you're constantly picking up your phone. It might mean that you're constantly coming up with new ideas. I am always coming up with new ideas. And it means that even in this podcast, I find it like there's various episodes where I still need to record the part 2 of the episode because I find it like difficult to return to something. And I have to like often force myself to do something. And it can look like, constantly looking at the phone, scrolling on social media a lot, running lots of different things at the same time and not completing boring tasks. So, for example, I'm meant to apply for something literally for about 10 years. And I still have not done it because I cannot get myself obviously you can see it's not like a life-changing thing that I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but it's something that I can't even really explain around why I haven't managed to force myself to do it. It's a task that has got many different aspects, and it's one of the tasks, I call it a boomerang task, which is where you have to take one little step and then you have to wait for someone else to do something. And then you have to take another step and you have to wait for someone else to do things. And I hate those type of tasks because I can't like knock something off my to-do list. It's like, I find that really difficult to actually tolerate. So how do I manage when I have to do boring tasks, and how do I keep myself, like, for example, how do I make myself do the actual recording for the podcast, for example? And how do I, when I have like tasks to do, when I have writing, how do I manage that dopamine seeking? So some of the ways that I do this are, first of all, I set a time limit. So if I'm finding something incredibly boring, I might start with a 5-minute time limit and just say, okay, I've just got to start. Especially if that's one of those boomerang tasks where there's little steps that I have to take and then I have to wait for someone else to do something. If it is something like a speeding ticket, I will look at it. I force myself now to look at things because I used to, when I had, many years ago in my 20s, when I had a lot of credit card debt, I would not open my credit card receipts. I would just leave them. And so it was a very massive shock for me. Not such a massive shock, but it was a shock when I actually added up all these credit card bills and I had £27,000 worth of debt from compulsive shopping. And that's been interesting because I've always languaged that to myself as shopping addiction, but there's a big overlap between addiction and ADHD. So I could now reframe my shopping as dopamine seeking. And I mean, dopamine seeking is, in a sense, we're trying to regulate ourselves, trying to kind of manage stuff. So now what I do, because I've taught myself more about how to adult, I know that if a speeding fine comes through the post, it's important that I look at it and understand the actual like details of what is being asked of me and action it. Even if it's way too painful to action in this exact moment, what I do now is I write in my diary when I have to action it. So it sometimes feels impossible to me to actually do that all on the same day, like to open the speeding fine, to look at it, to actually pay it or to contest it or whatever action I need to take. So now I look at it, dump it in the pile of paper on my desk and write in my diary when I need to pay it. And that's like a very simple task that I do that from to kind of manage the trickiness of trying to get boring tasks done. One of the major ways that I allow myself to get boring tasks done is to tab between tasks. So I have always thought I was an amazing multitasker, that I can run like so many different things at the same time. Like I'll be doing this task, then I'll quickly go and do a bit of this task, and I'll go and do a bit of that task. I'll do a bit of thinking work. I might write some stuff on my phone, and then I'll go back to the other task, which maybe was hanging up the washing or something like that. Now, in ADHD, they kind of would say that's not multitasking. They say that that's dopamine seeking, and that I'm unable to complete the boring task, because I don't have, if we're going back to that stuff about executive function, I am not able to pay enough attention and to do enough inhibition of myself. So I lose the attention and I can't inhibit the action of like going on to the next task. So I don't beat myself up for that. I've never kind of really thought, oh, I've got terrible executive functioning. What I do is I think to myself, I am resourcing myself with more interesting tasks interspersed with the more boring tasks. So maybe that's just like a positive reframe for myself, but I invite you into using that positive reframe too. I often find when I'm doing boring tasks on my computer, I'll have like multiple tabs open and I will go between the thing that is interesting and the thing that is boring. And when things get too much for me in the boring task, I go back to the more interesting task. And I can, and the way that I know it's too much for me is I get this intense feeling of discomfort in my body. So part of the ADHD, one of the like little tests is something called a QB check, which is something that I did online with like different colors and squares. And honestly, I found the whole thing so intensely painful. I felt like really bored at the same time as really wanting to get it right, but like really unwilling to pay attention. And I tried to talk myself through it. But that's how I kind of view, that's how I experience like some tasks where there's like an intense level of discomfort and I can't kind of force myself to go through something which feels too boring. So I guess in some extent I've accepted this and I really try and work with it as a way to resource myself. So I call it like interesting task resourcing, and allow myself to celebrate as some sort of sense of multitasking. Like if I'm doing something, like my kids go to a setting where they need a lunchbox, and I find it really difficult to go to do this whole process from beginning to end. I just find it like basically boring and I kind of lose track of things. And so I might go and put on the washing, or I might, I don't know, do something else in the middle of it, which I find gives me like a burst of efficiency. Like I like getting the washing done. It makes me feel like I'm being efficient and I'm getting some good things done, even though making the lunch is also important. But can you hear I'm getting really excited sharing this with you? And I'm also starting to lose my train of thought. That's another thing where I like lose my train of thought sometimes. But now, the counterbalance to this is that lots of people, like male productivity gurus, talk about, I don't know who talks about this, maybe this is Adam Grant, but there's this concept of flow. And if you get into flow, that would be the same, I guess, as hyperfocus and ADHD. But there's always this idea that you're not going to be in flow if you're constantly interrupting yourself. Now, I honestly don't, like, getting into flow is almost a state that happens more when I'm not really trying. And so punishing myself with the idea that I'm breaking my own flow when I'm doing this multitasking doesn't help me. I don't that easily get into that flow place. I have to do a lot of thinking before I get into a flow place and I can really have work stream out of me. And so I've accepted that a lot of the work that I do is actually thinking work beforehand, thinking, talking to myself, writing things down, and then I'll get into a flow. But in the initial phases, I do a lot of this jumping between tasks. So task resourcing to get through tasks that are more boring. And I allow myself to jump. I don't punish. I experience it as punishing if I try and force myself to do something that's really dull. I really have to try and work with my own system, because this is the only system I've got. And if I'm constantly telling myself I'm crap because I can't approximate what some dude in a book says about flow, well, then that doesn't help me, does it? So I want you to really think about, like, what helps you? What helps you be the best version of yourself? Can you celebrate the ways in which you get stuff done? Can you honor that? Can you really love on yourself without shame? And allow, so for example, if I'm talking about this dopamine seeking again, with one of the areas that I struggle in mothering, some of the things I struggle with are buying clothes for my kids, buying shoes, and getting things ready for the morning process, getting like a lunch ready. So the clothes and shoes thing I find really complex because I'm never quite sure exactly what outfits they will need. And I decided really early on to address them in a way that was functional. So for most of their lives, they've worn cotton leggings because I like natural fiber, and like cotton t-shirts. And I always thought it was important to be able to move and climb. So I prioritized functionality over thinking, I don't know. I just thought functionality was important. And so cotton leggings have always, like, they can climb really easy with those and it won't hamper them. I never wanted to put them in jeans when they were babies because I was like, oh, how can they bend their knees up if they're like trapped in these like strong cotton, like, I don't know. So that's just my thing. But what it's meant is that when I see other children, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't even know that you could buy that for children. Or when my children have expressed that they want something, I sort of haven't known about that, if you know what I mean. And I find buying shoes for them really complex because I find it difficult to understand what fits them, even if we've measured their feet. The utility of the shoe or what they need for how many pairs they need and what they need for when, I find kind of confusing to figure out. And so we've had like times where we've bought these like amazing leather boots, which just like have no purpose in their life, basically. They don't walk around with skirts and tights and boots on, or jeans tucked into boots, and they've got these like lovely little black leather boots, which are just like too sophisticated and not useful and don't have a thick enough sole. And whereas we bought them other fur-lined boots, which they could zip up themselves, which are really good, and those have been a real success. So I've had to really like just acknowledge I find that kind of complex, and I just find it a complicated thing to manage, even though I've been a compulsive shopper for myself, and I love putting outfits together for children. It has caused me some angst. So now the way that I cope with that is I buy t-shirts that fit them and more leggings, still as a basis, at the beginning of like each season when they grow. And I go to a physical shop, which is not in a shopping center, because I don't like getting like lost in the centers. And then I will park and look at what's available and buy some stuff as a selection. And sometimes I take them with me. That can be kind of chaotic if they're both with me, because then they want to buy everything. But then I can buy some things and show them to them and return what they don't like, so they still get choice and preference. But seeing things helps me understand what they might need. And I've been able to like improve. I look at what other children wear, so I kind of gather information about what do other people do and how can I use that to help myself. Okay, so I want to share another area that I find to be a struggle. And the reason I'm doing this is because I really want, like, we break down shame by hearing other people share their stories, and then we realize we're less alone. And if you have struggles with executive functioning, or you find certain aspects of mothering or your life hard, then look for ways to support yourself, to put like scaffolding in place to support you. Don't double down on self-criticism and spend time wallowing in shame thinking, why am I not like that person? That's not going to help you. You're a blessed, blessed person and you're doing the best you can. And the ways you are today are informed by many, many things from your past, the way you were tended to as a child, the subcortical network you were born with, what's going on with your minerals, what's going on with your biochemistry, so many different factors. So be gentle with yourself. Okay, so I've talked about dopamine seeking and how that can be really tricky in terms of getting things completed. I've talked about how I resource by going to more interesting tasks, so like interesting task resourcing. I've talked about some of the challenges I have with clothing my children and how I've kind of overcome that. And I'm always learning in that area, because sometimes we've had seasons where we basically haven't had enough clothes because I haven't I haven't really known what to buy. And so I share this with my husband now, and we kind of together decide. And I've outsourced a lot of shoe purchases to him, actually. for them. And I also I learned about a new barefoot website from a mom last year, and that really helped me, because then I could just go to one place and get my kids a bunch of boots and I don't know, some other things, which was really helpful to me. So always look around and see where you can get help from. One of the areas that I've struggled with is time blindness, specifically with my kids and with getting to places with them, and also in the mornings. So I'll split out two things. The daily morning process I find kind of complicated to manage, and there's so many iterative tasks or kind of separate tasks that need to be done, like helping them with their clothes, making sure they're dressed, their hair's done, they've got their socks on, making this lunch, which has got loads of different things in it. Arguably, I have overcomplicated their lunch, but there's various reasons that I pack that very specifically with specific food in it. And then they pack their water bottles and they take a flask of hot food. And so that I find really, really complicated. So, and I find it difficult to stay on track with actually making the lunch. So I have got my husband to help me with that. So you might wonder why in our house, the division of labor is I work less intensely than he does. So I do the mornings, and also because my work I've scheduled to start seeing my clients a little bit later so that I can take them to where they need to be and have enough time to get back and start not be frantic, essentially. So I am the one who's tasked with doing these lunches, except for the day that he works from home. But I get him to help me. So he has to get their water bottles ready, make sure they're washed and cleaned and fill them with water. And he has to do the hot food flask most of the time. And that really helps me, because then I can just prepare the lunchbox, cut up vegetables or fruit or whatever else I'm doing. And that's part of the way that we manage things. But if I was covered in shame and thinking that I had to approximate some perfect wife model, I don't know, role, then maybe I would not do that. But I have kind of identified the areas that I find complex, and together we deal with things. And he also has areas which he finds complex, so I help him with that. So really, you want to call your partner. If your partner is not emotionally immature, if you partner with a partner, if you parent with a partner, you want to be calling them into their own emotional growth and emotional maturity, so you don't have to weather or shoulder the whole burden of caregiving for your kids. And to notice where you have strong points and where they have strong points, so that you can utilize those together. Yeah, so he does certain aspects. He also unloads the dishwasher. He does most of the washing up. So in the morning, he unloads the dishwasher and prepares all these things. So that's a helpful start for me, so that I can focus on making the girls breakfast and doing the lunches. And that helps with the time blindness in the morning, so that I've stripped back other things. What I've also done in the morning is I have stripped back all the tasks that are associated with me getting ready. So this is on a regular morning basis. If I am not one of those people who's waking up at 5:30 to do a workout and shower and a bunch of research or something before my kids awake. Sorry, that's not me, basically. I'm trying to get as much sleep as I can. And if I was to shower and, say, wash my hair in the morning before I had to do the whole palavering of getting them out the door, honestly, we would never get there. We would get there at 12 or something. So my process is get up, get my clothes on, put on some of my fussy deodorant, which is my new thing that I love, and maybe brush my hair. So it's a very minimal routine, because the more tasks that I have added in, the more I struggle with adding in extra tasks. So, I told you about when tasks are boring, I resource myself with more interesting tasks. But if I do that in the morning when I'm trying to get ready and get them out to school, then I really run out of control. So there, I just stick to what I call my critical path. The critical path is a term from project management. It's used a lot in management consultancy. And I've talked about the critical path before, but for the mornings when I have to get my kids out of the house, I really just focus on the critical path of getting my clothes on. Like if I could take them to school in my nightie or my pajamas, I would. But that's probably like not such a good idea. So I do put on like clothes and brush my hair. And sometimes I even manage a pair of earrings because I love accessories. But so the critical path. So I really want you to notice what is on your critical path. How do you overcomplicate things? Do you expect yourself to have a full face of makeup or something? Are you like oppressing yourself with makeup, or that things have to look a certain way? If you struggle with time blindness, and if you struggle with understanding how long a task takes and spin out in the actual process of doing those tasks, then really like strip it back as much as you can. My issues around sequencing have really been helped by working out what my critical path is. So this applies like when I'm taking them on outings to meet friends, like when they're not going to school. I would find it really difficult to get there on time, because often what I would do is I would get up, make them breakfast, make a picnic, or get whatever is ready for them. And then I would go and do my showering and getting ready. Because if I'm going on an outing, then I do want to prepare myself, like with showers and everything. And that would like spin out, because then in the process of showering, I would just like lose focus and things. So I've totally stripped back what I do. I now would get up and shower straight away. And then my critical path is much clearer to me around, okay, what absolutely needs to happen for us to get out the door? And everything else is, I don't pay any attention to. So I've even taught my kids in a way that like if they start asking me a lot of random questions, that's not on my critical path. I can't do things for them. If we're trying to rush to get somewhere, I can't do things for them that will push me off the path, basically. So I try and manage. So my main management tool for time blindness is figuring out the night before what my critical path is, or a little bit ahead of time. So like washing my hair might be a thing that I would do the night before, and then in the morning I can just have a little quick shower or something. Or if there's any elements of a picnic, I can prepare before. So it's kind of planning. And it might be tricky if you struggle with executive functioning. Planning may also be difficult, but if you think about it ahead of time, it can sometimes be a bit easier. With the dopamine seeking, I resource myself with more interesting tasks. And I have also found that with dopamine seeking, I really need to distract myself. So I've shared before in some of the earlier episodes about how I've sometimes felt like my head is like it's like it's got either an automatic lawnmower or one of those vacuum cleaners that like is like an automatic vacuum cleaner that goes all over the floor all the time. And my brain feels like that's like it's always searching in the corners for other things, new ideas, what, that sort of stuff. And that's a massive characteristic, I understand, of ADHD in women. I'm sure this is also really exacerbated by perimenopause in some way. Because I feel like this has got worse for me as I've got older. But anyway, be that as it may. Also, to avoid like absolute exhaustion, I find distracting from that and shutting myself down in some sense is really important. And I do that by either reading. So reading a lovely novel, which really absorbs me. I've really had to kind of cultivate my reading habit again, and not to just read psychotherapy or trauma textbooks, but to actually read things that I love. I love trauma memoirs as well. But I mean, I find that more relaxing than a psychotherapy textbook. Lovely novelists. And that I find really distracting and really engaging. And also TV. I have tried to move away from TV as a resource because I find it very activating in many ways. And so I have to find like things that are like kind of maybe funny and a bit gentle, because otherwise I find it too activating and I dream about things and I can't kind of sleep well enough. But it is really important to find ways to turn off. It also helps me to go walking or to go swimming. Any exercise is really a helpful management tool for ADHD. Movement is crucial. So anyway, so that was about ADHD and executive functioning and shame. and about how it's really crucial to address the shame and to really tend to yourself. And I'm going to talk much more about shame and how um, to really kind of tend to that and notice that in yourself. But any time when you're coming up against something where you think, oh no, I can't do that, or oh no, I'm being a nuisance, or oh no, I can't do that, just really notice why. Why can't you? Like, is it possible to try and get that need met? Is there a way you can make something easier for yourself, or more pleasurable, or less kind of angsty? Even if someone else has got a different need, as an adult, you're allowed to meet your needs. And you may have come into an awareness of some neurodiversity by your own children. So what you allow them and how you scaffold and support for them and how you hold space for them, can you do that for yourself? Can you notice what might need to happen in the context of your family to hold space for what's going on for you? So with the time blindness, try this thing about the critical path. And with the dopamine seeking, really notice if you can celebrate yourself, celebrate the way that you deal with things, celebrate that maybe you're not the top person for dealing with boring tasks immediately, but there's probably a lot of other vibrancy you bring in other ways. So really, yeah, let's be sort of celebratory about this. I've really enjoyed talking to you about this, even though none of you actually are with me. And I'm interested about whether this is useful to you. And I've only focused on very sort of small elements of ADHD. So if you don't know anything about ADHD, this is not all that it is. But yeah, I'm sending you a lot of love, and I hope that you can grow in tenderness for yourself, really grow in tenderness and treat yourself as like someone special, not someone who should be criticized all the time. Okay, take really good care.